If you're in your 50s or early 60s and sometimes wonder if you're making the right financial decisions for your future, I want to share something that might help. Now, recently, I have been having deeper conversations with my older clients, people in their 70s who have been through this transition already. And there's something they keep telling me, something they wish they understood earlier. One insight in particular really stuck me because honestly, it is something I have been struggling with myself. It's a common trap that even financially successful people fall into, and I want to make sure you don't make the same mistake. The good news, if you're watching this now, you still have time to course correct. After working with many GCC expats through their retirement transitions, I have started to notice a pattern. Most of us think about life in three stages, but we often miss a fourth stage, one that's incredibly important but only lasts for a brief window. In your 20s and 30s, you probably had time and health, but maybe not much money yet. You were building your career, perhaps just starting your expat journey, like I did. In your 40s and 50s, where many of you might be now, you are finally earning well, you are still healthy, but time becomes precious. Between work responsibilities and family, it feels like there's never enough. Then there's what we typically think of as retirement in your mid 60s and 70s. You might have time and money, but health can start to become more of a consideration. But there's this fourth stage, usually somewhere in your late 50s, where you might have all three: time, money, and health. And from what I have learned from my older clients, this is when the most important decision gets made. Let me share what one of my clients, a 72-year-old gentleman from Dubai, told me recently. He said, Khalid, I spent decades building wealth, but I wish I had thought more about building time. It got me thinking about how we actually spend our time. I have noticed there are really three types, and most successful expats get really good at two of them, but sometimes overlook the third. First, there's career time. You have probably mastered this. You are successful, you are doing well professionally. Second, relationship time. Family, friends, the people who matter to you. And the third type, what I call recovery time, this seems to be what many of us in the GCC struggle with. These are the activities that actually give you energy back, that make you feel renewed. I'll be honest, I learned this lesson the hard way. When I first came to Dubai and was building my career, I was so focused on serving my clients and growing the business and that I forgot what actually energized me outside of work. It wasn't until I had a conversation with a 69-year-old client, and I have to say, this gentleman looked remarkably young for his age, that I started to understand what I was missing. He asked me simple question, Khalid, what activity makes you completely lose track of time? Not work, not obligations, but something that you do purely because you love it. I realized I didn't have a good answer. He told me he had rediscovered tennis, something he had done in his youth but had given up during his busy career years. Now he was back to it and it had become a huge part of his identity again. Here's what I learned from him. Some activities have expiration date. The things that require physical energy, mental sharpness, the ability to travel extensively, these don't wait for traditional retirement age. Now, let me share that insight I mentioned earlier, the one I have been struggling with myself, and I think it's something many successful people face. A few months ago, one of my clients called me. He had recently retired and financially everything was going well. We had structured his investment properly and his returns were exactly what we had projected. But he wanted to discuss something. He said, Khalid, I finally bought that car I had always wanted, a Porsche 911. After 30 years of hard work, I thought this would be my reward. I asked him how it felt, expecting to hear excitement. Instead, he said, well, the novelty wore off pretty quickly. Looking back, maybe I should have just rented one for a month to see if I really wanted it. This conversation made me reflect on my own behavior. Last year, I found myself wanting to buy an expensive watch. Not because I needed it, my phone tells time just fine, but because I wanted that visible sign of success. I realized I was falling into what some call the status game. We sometimes buy things not because we need them, but to signal our success or to prove we have made it. And I think this becomes more common as we get into our 50s and 60s. Maybe it's because we are thinking about our legacy, or maybe we are concerned about staying relevant in a world that often values youth. But here's what I have learned from my older clients: those expensive purchases really bring the lasting satisfaction we expect. What seems to bring real satisfaction is experiences, relationship, and this is important, genuine financial security that lets you sleep peacefully at night. This brings me to what I think is the most important decision. And it's not about buying things, it's about securing something much more valuable: peace of mind. Let me tell you about a client I'll call Ajay. He's a successful executive, 58 years old, been in Dubai for the last 15 years. On paper, everything looked great: substantial portfolio, property investments, and what most people would consider a diversified approach. But when we sat down and really looked at the numbers, his actual lifestyle cost, inflation over time, healthcare consideration, the possibility of 30 or more years in retirement, we discovered something concerning. Despite his success, the traditional approach might not sustain his lifestyle throughout retirement. And with people living longer these days, this was a real concern. You see, I have noticed that many financial advisors use standard retirement calculations that might not reflect the reality of expat life in the GCC. A lifestyle cost here can be significantly higher than what typical retirement calculators assume. Traditional investment approaches can be vulnerable to market downturns that might delay retirement plans. And many projections don't account for the sequence of returns. When those return happens matters a lot. This is where my background in private banking became really valuable. I learned about investment vehicles that were typically only available to ultra high net worth clients. These are called structure notes, and they weren't something most advisors offered to regular clients. They were usually reserved for private banking clients with very large portfolios. What makes them interesting is that they can potentially offer market upside while providing some protection for your capital. It's like having a safety net while still participating in growth opportunities. Now, I want to be clear: these aren't magic solutions and they are not right for everyone. But for the right situation, they can be quite powerful. For example, when markets had that difficult period in 2022, clients had structure notes with protection feature, saw their capital preserved while still earning returns. One of my clients, Joshi, who works at MR, has seen consistent growth over several years with this approach. He told me it gives him confidence knowing his capital is working for him but with built-in protections. So as I see it, if you are in your 50s or 60s, you essentially have three paths you can take, and the choice you make will significantly impact how the next phase of your life unfolds. Path 1 is you continue with conventional investment approaches, accepting that market volatility might impact your retirement timeline or lifestyle expectations. And this is what most people do, and for some, it works out fine. Part 2 is you move to a very conservative investments like fixed deposit, which might preserve capital but could struggle to keep pace with inflation over the long term. Part 3 is explore whether more sophisticated approaches like structure notes might be appropriate for your situation. Approaches that aim to provide both growth potential and some level of protection. Now, I can't tell you which path is right for you, and that depends on your specific situation, your risk tolerance, your goals. But I can tell you that the client who seem most at peace are those who took the time to really understand their options. Remember that client I mentioned who looked so much younger than his age? It wasn't just about physical health. He told me that having financial confidence, knowing his wealth was structured thoughtfully for the long term, gave him a kind of peace that affected every aspect of his life. Here's something I think is worth considering. The decision you make in the next few years will have a much bigger impact than the same decisions made later. It's not just about potential returns, though there is a mathematical reality to compound growth over time. It's about having options. If you are 50 today and take time to optimize your approach now, you might have 10, 15 years for that strategy to work before you need to start drawing from your investments. If you wait until 60, you have few years for any adjustments to make a difference. I've had the privilege of working with many successful people over the years, and I have noticed something. The ones who seem most content in the later years aren't necessarily the ones who accumulated the most wealth. They are the ones who made thoughtful decisions about their wealth while they still had time to course correct if needed. What I have observed and share with my clients is that the financial world is changing. Because of technology and regulations, strategies once reserved for the ultra wealthy are now becoming accessible to more people. It's not about urgency, it's about awareness. And for those who value structure over speculation, this is a meaningful evolution. If what I have shared today resonates with you and you're curious about whether structure notes might be appropriate for your situation, I would like to invite you to have a conversation. We offer what we call an expat portfolio review. It's a complimentary 30-minute discussion where we can look at your current situation and explore whether there might be opportunities to optimize your approach. There's no obligation, and honestly, it might confirm that what you are doing right now is exactly right for you, but it might also reveal some possibilities you haven't considered. I only work with people who are genuinely interested in exploring these strategies, and we typically work with investors who have at least $50,000 to invest. If that describes your situation, and if you're curious, I'll be happy to have that conversation. You know, the older clients I work with often say something similar. I wish I had taken the time to really understand my options earlier. If you're watching this, you have that opportunity right now. Whatever you decide, I hope this has been helpful. Take care and thank you for watching.